Well, hello folks. You know, I put out a video a while back about the little love knot sculptures, cast metal sculptures I've been selling on eBay. And I said I might try to make some in brass. And somebody sent me an email saying, hey Mike, if you're going to make some in brass, you really should film the process. I'd love to see it, and I bet others would too. So, well, that email came in a little late. I've already started making them in brass, but I think maybe I'll make a few more, and I will film the process, just for those who are interested. Lost foam casting, the way I do it, to make these little, I call them love knots. And they're a great Valentine's Day present. Guys, it's coming up fast. So, I'll put a link to the ones I'm selling on eBay in down here at the bottom of the video and in the description, so you can check them out if you're hard up for a present for your significant other. Let me tell you, worked like a charm with my wife. She wasn't my wife at the time, but she is now. That should tell you something. So anyway, yeah, I'll show you the process of making a few of these. The first step in doing the lost foam casting, at least the way I do it, requires sand and some old tin cans. These cans have been used a couple of times, but that's okay, they'll work again. We don't eat that much canned food, so cans are kind of hard to come by around here. So now this is just ordinary sand. You could use beach sand. This is what they call play sand, which you can buy in 40 or 50 pound bags at Lowe's or Home Depot, or also filter sand for sand water filters. Now, this sand has already been used a few times, but I got to filter it after each use to get the crud out of it. And I already filtered this stuff before I used it the first time. It, you know, that play sand has a lot of rocks and stuff in it. And so I filtered it the first time, or I sieved it the first time with just a fairly coarse sieve to get all the rocks and stuff out of it. And then this is a 30 mesh sieve here that I'm using just to get the smaller crud out of it. The finer the sand you use, the more detail you'll get in your castings. So like I said, this stuff's all been sieved before, so there's not that much big stuff in it, but after each casting there's always some crud. The vapor from the vaporizing foam tends to make the sand stick together into big globs. So I'll filter it again, plus there's other stuff in there. Bits of the cans, bits of the labels from the cans, whatever else has landed in this stuff. See, there's some consolidated sand. I hope that's showing up. So we'll just filter it out. There's some brass that got in there somehow. And get ourselves some nice fine 30 mesh clean sand here to work with. And then we'll go to the next step. There's a lot of prep work before you start melting the metal. You got to get everything ready to go, because once the metal's ready to go, there's no time to mess around. You got to get it in the mold. Okay, we've got the sand we need prepped and ready to go. Let's set that aside out of the way. Now, to do lost foam casting, of course, we need some kind of foam. And what I've got here is something called backer rod. It's 1/2 inch in diameter. It's used for filling gaps and wide cracks and things before caulking or plastering over a surface. Just to give it something, some kind of support behind it, hence the name backer rod. And it's just extruded foam like this, 1/2 inch in diameter. So this is what we're going to use to make our knots. And what we do is just tie a little knot in the end of this. So there's a knot right there. Now, actually I think I'll make the tail a little longer on that, just a little bit. Alright, there we go. That's more like it. And now this other tail I'm going to leave quite long, and I'll explain why later. But there, that's what we're going to cast in brass in the sand. That knot right there. Okay? So let's make another one. This part goes pretty darn quickly. And I'll tell you what, you could make a lot of knots out of one package of this backer rod stuff. In fact, I'm not even going to cut that because that looks like that's just enough material for another knot. So we got 2 knots here. And the next thing we need to do is we need to put them in a can and bury them in sand. I'll show you that next. Alright, now I've used these cans before, so they're a little bit mangled. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some tape around the top. Sometimes I have to sort of pry the top of the can apart to get the casting out, and you'll see why later. The metal will fill the whole top of the can on top of the sand, and it won't want to come out because the can is not smooth on the inside, so I have to mangle it a little bit. I'm just putting some aluminum tape around it to hold the sand in so it doesn't leak out. If you're using new cans, you don't have to worry about that. Cans aren't the only thing you can use. You can use something like a ceramic flower pot. That might work. I wouldn't use anything that'll melt or burn though, because the brass, liquid brass, is very, 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 very hot. And the heat is going to leak out through the sand into whatever you pour the brass into eventually. And there will be fire if you use something that will melt or burn. I like cans, but like I said, you can use other stuff. Terracotta flower pots are good. I've used those too. Alright. So there's that. Now, tall cans, or whatever other container you use, it should be fairly tall. It shouldn't be short, because we want to bury this down pretty deep in the can, because the brass exerts considerable pressure when you pour it in, and what's going to happen is it's going to want to displace the sand upwards, and you'll wind up with something horribly distorted if you don't bury it fairly deep down in the sand and let the pressure, the weight of the sand, hold the brass down. So I only have one tall can, unfortunately, but this can should be about tall enough. I've used it before. So let me put some sand in the bottom of it and act as an insulator so that the brass doesn't touch the metal down there. And then just continue filling it up with sand pretty much to the top, with the tail of the knot sticking out. Tap it and make sure that the sand is packed down nice and tight and gets in the nooks and crannies of the knot. You know, you want to have a little gap there. Somebody could use that as a pendant if they wanted to, by running a chain through there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of make a moat right here around where the tail comes up. Put a little more sand in here, just so that, yeah, make a little bit of moat there so that the metal, when we pour it in, will run towards the tail, and down the tail it'll vaporize it as it goes, almost instantly vaporize it, and run down into the sand and fill the void as it vaporizes that foam. And I'm going to do the same thing with this. I put a little bit of sand in the bottom. Now this is a slightly taller can, so that's a much better height actually for this. I just want to get the knot in here so it's not touching the bottom of the can and it's not touching the sides of the can. Get a little sand in here to hold it in place right about where I want it. And I'll pour some more sand on top here. Fill up the can. I don't want any part of this touching the can because I don't want the hot brass to weld itself to the steel can. Okay. Need a little more sand. Should have sifted out a little bit more. Okay. Make our little moat here so that the area around the tail sticking up is the lowest part. When we pour the metal in, it'll run right down the tail. So there we go. So we've got 2 molds made and ready to go. All we've got to do now is melt some brass and pour it in there. Easy peasy. So these are pretty much ready to go. Now I know some of you out there are probably asking, maybe loudly, why I did not dip these in any sort of surface coating. And you can if you want. If you got some, some drywall mud or some professional type lost foam casting surface coating, use it. Fine, go ahead. But the foam I'm using has a very rough texture on the surface, and the sand I'm using has been sifted very fine. So the limiting factor on how good these things look really is the foam. And giving it some sort of conformal coating before putting it in the sand and pouring it, it's not going to look any better than it's going to look just in the sand. So, I'm just going to skip that step. I might get more consistent results if I use some sort of coating on it, but I'm just not going to bother just, having to dip it, wait for it to dry. Then, I'm just going to go. And, if I lose one or two when I'm making them, that's fine. I just melt them down and pour them into the next ones. It's just too easy this way. And it generally works. So, but, I have used the coating for stuff that's more intricate, stuff where I need a better surface finish. Yeah, use the coating. But here, I'm not bothering. All right, the rule of thumb when casting metal, at least my rule of thumb, is to melt down more metal than you think you're going to need, because you don't want to run out in the middle of a pour. So melt down more than you think you're going to need, and then melt down a little more yet, and have some more metal on standby, ready to go to fill up your crucible as it melts. So I've got these cutoffs from making previous love knot sculptures. So these are the tops of them, and cut them off. So put that in there, and I'll have these ready to go in the crucible as this stuff melts, just so we can get a fairly full crucible out of this. Don't leave metal in your crucible though. You want to have extra metal after you're done pouring, but have some sort of ingot mold handy that you can pour the extra metal in. Steel muffin tins are a popular option. I also have some graphite molds, ingot molds. I'll probably use those rather than getting the muffin tins out. This stuff comes out of the graphite molds a lot easier than sometimes you have to pound it out of the muffin tins. So let me get everything ready to go, and then we'll fire up the furnace. Okay, I like to get absolutely everything I'm going to need ready to go before I even start up the furnace. Just, you don't want to have to run off and find something at the last second. That can be annoying. Now, for what I'm going to need here, it's going to also include some welding gloves and a respirator. And the respirator is never a bad idea when you're melting metal. When you're melting brass and other alloys that contain tin, it's a must, because the tin will volatilize and you don't want to be breathing it. So we'll have a respirator on later on in this process. But I've also got I got some metal tongs here. I got this tool I made for getting the crucible in and out of the foundry furnace. I've got some crucible tongs. Got my graphite molds for dumping out the excess brass when we're done. Got the 2 molds I've made that we're going to do the lost foam casting with right here by the furnace. Got the crucible with brass in it. More brass ready to go. And this is my spoon for scooping the dross off the top of the brass before pouring. I've also got a small propane torch for lighting the furnace. So big propane tank, propane burner, furnace, which at this point is mostly just KO wool. It used to have a metal drum around it, but the metal drum has rusted away over the years. The KO wool's still holding it all together, so works good. Okay, let me get the brass in. We'll get it lit and start melting the metal. Okay, let me get the crucible in the furnace. Everything's cold. It's quite chilly this morning. It's a good day to run the furnace because it's chilly. This is not so much fun when it's 95 degrees. Okay, we'll get this fired up. And I'll put the lid on to keep the heat in. And now we just gotta wait for the metal to start melting. And I'm gonna put one of these up here to start preheating. You never want to put cold metal in a crucible full of melted metal, because if there's moisture in that, you'll get a steam explosion. Now when you put it in, you want to put it in gently just so you don't splash metal everywhere. So we'll let this go and heat up. It'll probably take 20-30 minutes until the metal melts. We'll put some more metal in to fill up the crucible, and then we'll be ready to pour. Starting to get good and hot in the furnace. Everything's glowing orange. The metal hasn't quite started melting yet. Takes a while. Got to pump a lot of heat into metal to get it to melt. So it's been maybe 10 minutes. It'll start melting soon. Well, it's a few minutes later. The metal's starting to melt. I can see it in there. Starting to get some white smoke out of the furnace. Now that white smoke is going to be tin that is volatilizing. So I am going to stay upwind of that, and I'm going to put that piece of brass that's been sitting there warming up, I'm going to carefully put it into the crucible in there. Notice how the white smoke stopped? Putting that piece into the crucible was like putting a whole lot of ice into a hot drink. It chilled down that metal immediately. And we're not getting the tin boiling off anymore. Or we're not getting the zinc boiling off anymore. So, it's got to heat up a little more and melt that piece of metal. I'll put this one up here and start it preheating. I don't know if we'll need it or not, but I'll probably melt it down anyway. So, it's got to keep heating it up. Alright, it's been a few more minutes. As you can see, the white smoke is back. The metal in the crucible has melted. The white smoke, again, is from the zinc volatilizing in there, making zinc oxide as it comes out. It's the kind of stuff you put on your nose to keep you from getting sunburned, but you don't want to breathe that stuff and get it in your lungs. So again, I'm going to stay upwind and put this in gently. And I don't want to splash all that liquid in there out all over the place. I made that mistake before. Drop a piece of metal into a crucible full of molten metal, and that metal will just splash all over. You don't want that. So again, we just have to wait for it to warm up some more. You see this white smoke is gone. Okay, that last bit of metal I put in there is just about melted. That didn't take very long, just a few minutes. As you can see, we got a lot of white smoke boiling out. I have just turned the heat down on the burner because we don't really need to get the metal any hotter. We just need to get it melted all the way through here. And if we get it too hot, we are going to have a lot of zinc oxide coming off of it. I will probably get my iron bar out and give it a stir because there's a mixture of virgin brass ingots in there and stuff I've used before. So there's probably a little bit of a difference in the alloys. Certainly the stuff I've used before has had some of its zinc boiled off. So I'll give it a good stir, make sure it's pretty uniform, I'm just going to preheat the stir bar for a minute or so before I stick it down in the crucible. Alright, let me give this stuff a stir. Notice I'm standing upwind. That is hot. Alright. Last thing I'm going to do before we pour is I'm going to preheat my ingots here. Get any moisture out of them. I'm going to turn the fire down even a little more. The metal is more than hot enough. We're boiling a lot of the zinc off. So I'm going to preheat the ingots there just so that I get any moisture out of them so I don't get a steam explosion when I pour the leftover brass into them. Also got to preheat my stirring spoon. Get that preheat. And then give that a few minutes for those to warm up. Then we'll be ready to pour. These will go pretty fast then. Okay, I'm putting my respirator on. From here on, you're probably not going to be able to hear anything I say. I'll just narrate in captions at the bottom. Okay, fire off. Skimming the dross. Here we go. Okay, that didn't quite go to script. You're getting this warts and all. You know, one of my previously used cans there sprung a bad leak on the side, dumped a lot of brass out on the ground. Hopefully, we actually got something molded in it. We'll see. I'll collect all that brass and reuse it. But you can see why it's so hard to get the brass out of the cans. it. What I like about metal castings. You can just keep remelting it over and over again until you get it right. Oh, look at that. Looks like we got one reasonably good knot there. Getting this one out may be a little more difficult. I guess it's time to get some new cans. Well, all the sand's come out. Hopefully there's a casting in there. Oh, that's hot. Wow. It's really, really hot. There we go. They don't look like much while they're still hot, but they'll clean up nice. These don't always want to come out while they're still hot. Once they cool down and shrink a bit, they come out of the molds. There we go. I call that stone soup. People wonder how primitive cultures managed to cook when all they had was wicker baskets. Well, if they could make the baskets waterproof with resin, all they had to do was put hot rocks in it and they could boil water, make soup. Stone soup. So anyway, we're going to look at those and see how they look after they cool down. Well, neither of these look particularly good at this stage, but they've got a lot of scale on them. I just need to cut them off and polish them up, get them on a wire wheel, polish them up. They'll look pretty good. So guys, there you have it. That's how I make the knots for those who are interested in seeing the process. So I've got a limited number of these brass knots available on eBay. I'll put a link to that down at the bottom here and in the description. Plus I still have some of the aluminum knots left too. They make a great Valentine's Day gift. It's about 2 weeks away now, guys. So, you know, if you really want one, get the order in quick so I can ship it to you before the big day. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this interesting. Give the video a thumbs up, give it a like, and subscribe to see future videos. I got lots more videos coming out all the time. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.